Here's the thing, life has this way of revealing itself through patterns, doesn't it? Patterns in how we connect, how we show up, how we either lean in or pull back. And if we're being really honest, a lot of us are spending too much time trying to get someone's attention, someone's approval, someone's love, someone's validation by chasing, by overthinking, by playing these little games we think will protect us or win us something. Seeking attention or validation from others often feels like the only way to affirm our worth, but it's a path that rarely leads to the kind of fulfillment we're longing for. There's something so deeply human about wanting to be seen, heard, and valued. But when that desire turns into begging, whether through words, actions, or even subtle emotional cues, it becomes a form of self-betrayal. It's like we're saying, please tell me I matter because I don't quite believe it myself. And that's the problem. The begging doesn't start with others. It starts with the parts of ourselves that question whether we're enough. When we beg for attention or validation, it's usually rooted in fear. Fear that we're not lovable as we are. Fear that if we don't try harder, we'll be abandoned or forgotten. Fear that our silence, our stillness, or even our true selves aren't interesting enough to hold someone's gaze. But here's the thing about fear, it whispers lies. It convinces us that we need to do more, be more, or shrink ourselves into something palatable just to receive scraps of connection. Begging, in whatever form it takes, doesn't actually earn us respect or love, it diminishes it. We've all been there, haven't we? Sending that extra text when someone didn't reply. Making excuses for someone's lack of effort because we're afraid to let go. Maybe even contorting ourselves into versions we think someone will like more. But when we do this, we stop being ourselves. We trade authenticity for approval. And the problem is, approval gained through begging is hollow. It's temporary. It never quite fills the ache we're trying to soothe. The truth is, what's meant for you will not require begging. Relationships, whether romantic, platonic, or professional, built on a foundation of genuine connection and mutual respect, will never make you feel like you need to perform or plead to be valued. Healthy connections don't demand that you chase after them. They don't ask you to overextend yourself just to hold their attention. Instead, they meet you halfway. They show up because they want to, not because you've convinced or coerced them. But stepping away from this dynamic requires us to confront some hard truths about ourselves. It asks us to look at the ways we've been complicit in our own depletion. It challenges us to stop externalizing our worth and start finding it within. This isn't about arrogance or thinking you don't need anyone. It's about knowing that your value doesn't increase or decrease based on who's paying attention to you. It's about realizing that the people and opportunities that truly align with your worth will never make you question it. Letting go of the need to beg doesn't mean you stop caring or investing in relationships. It simply means you stop trying to force something that should flow naturally. Begging isn't love. Begging isn't connection. Begging is fear dressed up as effort, and the sooner we let go of it, the sooner we create space for the kind of connection that feels safe, effortless, and true. Chasing people or opportunities often feels like a natural response when we sense distance, disinterest, or unavailability. It's as though the gap between us and what we want becomes a problem we need to solve, a challenge we need to overcome. But what happens when chasing becomes a pattern? When the effort, energy, and focus we pour into pursuit isn't met with equal investment, it's easy to find ourselves in a cycle that leaves us drained, frustrated, and questioning our worth. Chasing, at its core, comes from a place of scarcity, the belief that if we don't run after something, we might lose it. Yet what we often fail to realize is that anything requiring chasing may not be meant for us in the first place. Chasing can take many forms. Maybe it's texting someone repeatedly when they're slow to respond. Maybe it's always being the one to initiate plans with a friend who rarely reciprocates. Perhaps it's bending over backward to gain approval from a boss or colleague who never seems to notice your contributions. It might even be the way we chase abstract ideals like success or perfection, sacrificing our well-being in the process. Regardless of the specifics, chasing often has the same underlying motivation: fear. Fear of being forgotten, left behind, or replaced. Fear of missing out on what seems like the perfect relationship, the ideal job, or the life we think we're supposed to have. The problem with chasing is that it disrupts balance. Healthy relationships and opportunities don't require constant effort to keep them alive. When we find ourselves always moving towards someone or something without that movement being mirrored back, it creates an uneven dynamic. Over time, this imbalance erodes self-respect because it reinforces the idea that we have to work extra hard just to be worthy of attention, care, or success. Instead of feeling empowered by our efforts, we often feel depleted, as though we're carrying the weight of something that's not ours to hold. It's important to recognize the emotional toll of chasing. When we chase, we're often living in a state of heightened anxiety, always wondering what we can do to close the distance or make things work. This mindset can leave us feeling perpetually inadequate and we're never doing enough. And when our efforts aren't met with the response we hoped for, the rejection stings even more because we've invested so much of ourselves into the pursuit. Chasing, in this sense, becomes a way of outsourcing our happiness and self-worth, tying them to external outcomes that are often beyond our control. On a deeper level, chasing can also be a way of avoiding stillness. When we're constantly in pursuit, we don't have to confront the discomfort of waiting, uncertainty, or even rejection. Chasing keeps us busy, but it doesn't necessarily bring us closer to what we truly want or need. In fact, it can distract us from the opportunities and relationships that are already aligned with us. The energy we spend chasing what's running away from us could be used to nurture what's already present in our lives, or to create space for new things to come in. Stepping away from the chase requires trust in yourself, trust in the process, and trust in the idea that what's meant for you won't require you to overextend yourself. This doesn't mean giving up on effort altogether. Effort is still necessary for building and maintaining meaningful connections, advancing in your career, or pursuing personal goals. But there's a difference between effort that flows naturally and effort that feels forced. Genuine connections and opportunities don't require you to run yourself ragged. They show up, meet you halfway, and evolve organically. When you stop chasing, you allow yourself to reclaim your energy and focus it where it truly matters. Instead of trying to prove your worth to people or situations that don't recognize it, you begin to invest in yourself and the things that bring you joy, growth, and fulfillment. By stepping back, you create space for the right people and opportunities to find their way to you, not because you chase them, but because they were always meant to align with who you are and what you bring to the table. Saying what you mean and showing up authentically is one of the most courageous and transformative things you can do. It sounds simple, doesn't it? Just speak your truth. Just be yourself. But in practice, it's often one of the hardest things to do because we live in a world that teaches us to hide parts of who we are. We've been conditioned to worry about how others might react, to fear rejection, and to avoid confrontation. So, instead of saying what we mean, we soften our words, hold back our thoughts, or offer a version of ourselves we think will be more acceptable. It feels safer in the moment, but over time, this avoidance chips away at our relationships and, more importantly, at our sense of self. When you don't say what you mean, you create distance between yourself and others. People can't truly connect with you if they don't know where you stand or how you feel. When you hide your truth, you might protect yourself from immediate discomfort, but you also build walls that keep others from knowing you. This can lead to misunderstandings, unmet needs, and a lingering sense of disconnection, even in relationships that matter deeply to you. The irony is that the very thing we're trying to avoid, conflict, discomfort, vulnerability, ends up showing up in other ways when we're not honest. Authenticity is about alignment. It's about ensuring that what you think, feel, and say are in harmony. When you live in alignment, your words and actions reflect your inner truth, and that creates a sense of integrity and self-respect. On the other hand, when you suppress your truth or say things just to please others, you create internal conflict. You might feel resentment, frustration, or even guilt because you know you're not being honest, not with others, and not with yourself. Over time, this can erode your confidence and sense of self-worth because you're constantly sending yourself the message that your truth doesn't matter. But here's the thing, saying what you mean doesn't have to be harsh or confrontational. It's not about being brutally honest to the point of hurting others. It's about being kind and clear. It's about expressing yourself in a way that honors both your truth and the dignity of the person you're speaking to. It's saying, this is how I feel, or this is what I need, without apologizing for it or expecting others to read your mind. It's also about listening, because being authentic doesn't mean dominating the conversation. It means showing up with openness and respect. One of the reasons people struggle with authenticity is the fear of the outcome. What if they don't like what I have to say? What if I upset them? What if they walk away? These are valid fears because vulnerability always carries risk, but the alternative, staying silent, hiding parts of yourself, or pretending to be someone you're not, is far more damaging in the long run. When you avoid speaking your truth to keep someone else comfortable, you end up sacrificing your own comfort and well-being. And the truth is, the people and situations that truly align with you will respect and appreciate your honesty, even if it's difficult in the moment. It's also important to remember that authenticity is a practice, not a destination. You won't always get it right, and that's okay. Sometimes you'll say too much, sometimes too little. Sometimes fear will get the best of you and you'll hold back. What matters is that you keep trying, that you keep showing up as fully as you can. Every time you speak your truth, you're building a foundation of trust, not just with others, but with yourself. You're proving to yourself that your voice matters, that your feelings are valid, and that your presence in the world is enough. Being authentic also means letting go of the need to control how others perceive you. You can't manage their reactions, and it's not your job to. Your job is to be honest, to be kind, and to show up as the most genuine version of yourself. That's where true connection begins. It's not about perfection or always having the perfect words. It's about being real, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you're afraid. Because the relationships, opportunities, and experiences that are meant for you will always make room for your truth. And the more you practice showing up as you, the more you create a life that reflects who you truly are. Playing games in relationships and interactions might feel like a way to protect yourself or gain an advantage, but in reality, it undermines the very foundation of connection. Games are rooted in fear, insecurity, and a lack of trust either in yourself, the other person, or the process of building authentic relationships. They might provide a temporary sense of control, a fleeting validation, or a small ego boost, but they always come at the cost of deeper intimacy and mutual respect. When you play games, you're not showing up as your true self, and you're not inviting the other person to do so either. Instead, you're creating an environment of uncertainty, manipulation, and emotional distance. Games often begin with small actions that seem harmless on the surface. It might be waiting hours or even days to respond to a message, not because you're genuinely busy, but because you want to appear less interested or more in control. It might be withholding affection or attention to see if the other person will work harder to gain it. It might even be creating jealousy or tension to test how much someone cares. These behaviors can feel strategic in the moment, but they're ultimately counterproductive. They don't build trust, they erode it. They don't foster connection, they sabotage it. One of the most damaging aspects of playing games is that it turns relationships into competitions. Instead of being about mutual care, understanding, and growth, the relationship becomes a battle of who has the upper hand. Who cares less? Who can make the other person chase them? Who gets to feel like they're in control? But relationships aren't supposed to be about control, they're about partnership. They're about showing up vulnerably and meeting each other halfway. When you're busy playing games, you're not truly present in the relationship because you're too focused on winning or at least not losing. Another consequence of playing games is the emotional exhaustion it creates. Keeping track of strategies, maintaining appearances, and constantly calculating your next move takes energy that could be better spent on genuine connection and personal growth. Games don't just drain the other person, they drain you as well. They keep you stuck in a cycle of doubt, anxiety, and second guessing, preventing you from experiencing the joy and freedom of being yourself. Over time, this can lead to feelings of emptiness and dissatisfaction because the connection you've built isn't based on authenticity. It's based on performance. Playing games also sends a powerful message about your own self-worth. When you engage in manipulation or strategic withholding, you're essentially telling yourself that who you are isn't enough. You're saying that you need to play tricks or create illusions to keep someone's attention or affection. This belief is not only untrue, but it's also harmful. It keeps you from embracing your inherent you and showing up as your full, unfiltered self. It also sets a precedent for accepting less than you deserve, because games are often a response to someone else's lack of clarity, effort, or emotional availability. Breaking free from the cycle of playing games starts with self-awareness. It requires you to look at why you feel the need to engage in these behaviors. Are you afraid of rejection? Are you trying to protect yourself from getting hurt? Are you seeking validation in ways that don't align with your values? Once you identify the root of the behavior, you can begin to address it. This might mean working on your self-esteem, setting healthier boundaries, or simply practicing more honest and direct communication. Being honest and straightforward can feel vulnerable, especially if you've been using games as a defense mechanism. It means risking rejection or disappointment. It means giving up the illusion of control and trusting the process of connection. But vulnerability is where real intimacy begins. When you stop playing games, you create space for authentic interactions. You allow yourself to be seen, and you give others the chance to meet you where you are. This doesn't mean that every interaction will lead to the outcome you want, but it does mean that the connections you do build will be real and meaningful. Choosing not to play games is an act of self-respect and respect for others. It's a declaration that you value honesty, integrity, and authenticity over temporary validation or control. It's a way of saying, I'm willing to show up as I am, and I'm inviting you to do the same. This approach might feel risky, but it's also incredibly freeing. It allows you to build relationships based on mutual trust and understanding rather than fear and manipulation. And in the long run, those are the relationships that truly matter. Trusting that your worth doesn't depend on others' responses or approval is one of the most liberating realizations you can embrace. It's natural to want to feel valued and appreciated by others, but when your sense of self is tied to external validation, you give away your power. You make your self-worth contingent on things you can't control, someone else's opinion, reaction, or attention, and this leaves you vulnerable to constant self-doubt. True freedom comes from understanding that your value is inherent, not something that can be given or taken away based on how others perceive you. From a young age, many of us are conditioned to seek approval. Praise from parents, teachers, or peers feels like confirmation that we're on the right track, that we're doing well, or that we're lovable. Over time, this creates a pattern where we begin to rely on external feedback to feel good about ourselves. We may internalize the belief that we're only as good as the grades we earn, the relationships we maintain, or the accolades we receive. This reliance on external validation can follow us into adulthood, showing up in our careers, friendships, and romantic relationships. But the truth is, no amount of external approval can replace the inner security that comes from recognizing your worth. When you depend on others' approval, you often find yourself adjusting your behavior to meet their expectations. You may say yes to things you don't want to do, agree with opinions you don't share, or silence your true feelings to avoid conflict. While these actions might win you temporary validation, they come at a cost. Over time, they create a disconnect between who you are and how you show up in the world. This disconnection can lead to feelings of emptiness, frustration, or even resentment because you're not honoring your authentic self. Relying on others for your sense of worth also puts you on an emotional roller coaster. When someone praises you, you feel great, but when you face criticism or indifference, your self-esteem takes a hit. This constant up and down creates a fragile sense of self, one that's easily shaken by the opinions or actions of others. It can also lead to a tendency to overanalyze interactions, replay conversations in your head, or question whether you're enough. Living this way is exhausting and unsustainable. The key to breaking free from this cycle is recognizing that your worth is not up for negotiation. It doesn't fluctuate based on how others treat you, what they say, or how they respond. Your worth is constant, rooted in the fact that you are a human being with unique qualities, experiences, and perspectives. This isn't about arrogance or thinking you're better than anyone else. It's about knowing that you're enough just as you are. You don't need to prove it, earn it, or convince anyone else of it. This shift in perspective doesn't mean you stop caring about others' opinions entirely. Feedback and connection are valuable, and it's natural to want positive relationships and mutual respect. But there's a difference between valuing someone's perspective and letting it define you. When you trust your worth, you can engage with others from a place of confidence rather than insecurity. You can accept criticism without internalizing it, and you can appreciate praise without becoming dependent on it. This balance allows you to remain grounded regardless of the external circumstances. Trusting your worth also means setting boundaries and prioritizing your well-being. When you're not seeking approval, you're less likely to overextend yourself or say yes out of fear of disappointing others. Instead, you can make choices that align with your values and goals. This might mean walking away from relationships or situations that don't respect your worth, even if it's uncomfortable. It's not about being unkind or dismissive. It's about honoring yourself and recognizing that you deserve to be treated with respect and care. This trust in your worth is something you cultivate over time. It requires practice, self-reflection, and a willingness to let go of old patterns. It might feel unfamiliar, even scary at first, because it asks you to step into a place of vulnerability and self-acceptance. But the more you embrace this mindset, the more you'll find that you don't need external validation to feel whole. You'll start to notice that the relationships and opportunities that align with your true self will naturally come your way. These connections are based on mutual respect and authenticity, not on a need to prove or perform. And this is where real confidence and freedom begin to grow. The idea of being enough just as you are is a profound and transformative truth that often feels elusive. In a world that constantly measures worth through achievements, appearances, and comparisons, the belief that you are inherently worthy can feel almost radical. From an early age, we are taught to strive to excel in school, to meet societal expectations, to mold ourselves into versions that are palatable and pleasing to others. While growth and improvement are important parts of life, they can sometimes morph into an endless chase for perfection, leaving little room for self-acceptance. Being enough doesn't mean you're flawless or that there's no room for growth. It means recognizing that your value as a person is not dependent on external factors. It's about embracing your humanity, your strengths and your imperfections, your successes and your struggles. It's understanding that you don't have to prove your worth by overperforming, overgiving, or overcompensating. You are worthy simply because you exist, and that worth does not waver, even when you face setbacks, rejection, or failure. The challenge lies in quieting the internal voice that tells you otherwise. This voice often whispers that you need to do more, be more, or achieve more to be deserving of love, respect, or happiness. It might remind you of past mistakes or point out perceived shortcomings. It thrives on comparison, urging you to measure your life against others, even though those comparisons are often incomplete and inaccurate. Social media, societal standards, and cultural pressures amplify voice, creating a false narrative that everyone else has it figured out while you're falling behind. But this narrative is not the truth. The truth is that being enough is not about meeting a specific standard or checking off a list of accomplishments. It's about being present in your life and accepting yourself as you are, even as you continue to learn and grow. It's about understanding that your worth is not tied to how others perceive you or what you can produce. When you internalize this truth, you free yourself from the exhausting cycle of seeking approval, chasing perfection, or fearing failure. When you believe you are enough, you begin to approach life differently. You show up more authentically, unburdened by the need to constantly prove yourself. You start making choices based on what feels right for you, not on what will impress or please others. You become more willing to take risks and try new things because failure no longer feels like a reflection of your value. Instead of being paralyzed by fear of judgment, you embrace the idea that mistakes and missteps are part of being human. Believing you are enough also transforms the way you relate to others. When you're secure in your worth, you're less likely to seek validation through relationships. You stop clinging to people who don't see your value or trying to win over those who withhold their care. Instead, you gravitate toward connections that are genuine, mutual, and supportive. You become more compassionate, both to yourself and to others, because you understand that everyone is navigating their own journey of self-acceptance. This belief doesn't mean you'll never feel doubt or insecurity again. Those feelings are part of the human experience. But when they arise, you'll have the tools to face them with grace. You'll remind yourself that your worth isn't on trial, that you don't have to be perfect to be deserving of love and belonging. Over time, this becomes a foundation that allows you to weather life's challenges with resilience and self-compassion. Being enough doesn't require you to be static or complacent. It simply means that your starting point is solid. From that foundation, you can pursue your dreams, set meaningful goals, and continue to grow not because you need to prove anything, but because you want to honor your potential. This shift in mindset creates a life that is not only more fulfilling, but also more aligned with who you truly are. It allows you to embrace your story, even the messy and imperfect parts, knowing that none of it diminishes your worth. In the end, life is too short for begging, chasing, overthinking, or playing games. It's about choosing courage over comfort, authenticity over performance, and self-worth over external validation. When you trust your value, speak your truth, and show up fully as yourself, you create space for real connections, meaningful relationships, and a life that truly aligns with who you are. The world doesn't need a perfect version of you. It needs the real you. Step into your truth, honor your worth, and live boldly from a place of authenticity and love. That's where your power lies.